everybody, welcome back to my channel Learn with Virali. I'm Virali, your guide on this coding adventure. In this video, I'll discuss 5 different question types that you will see onto your PMP exam. After helping hundreds of students pass their PMP exam, I can guarantee you will see variations of the question that I'll be discussing in a while. So if you have not subscribed yet, please subscribe to my channel as I regularly post videos based on the PMP exam preparation, software development, and so on. So let's get started. So the very first type of question that you would see on your exam is where the stakeholders are having conflict in regards to certain project scenarios. Definitely these kind of questions do pop up in the exam, but the scenarios are going to be different. Let's take a look at one of the sample question in this regards. So the question states that there were 2 key stakeholders that were disagreeing on a project deliverable. One of them wants to add the features while the other one wants to remain on the original scope. So as a project manager, what are you supposed to do first? So these kind of questions, as in what is something that you should do at the very first step as a project manager, are often asked in the PMP exam. Now let's see what are the approaches that we should follow and ultimately what should be the correct answer based on that approach. Okay, so now let us see what are different approaches that we can apply on for the previous sample question that we had discussed. In that question regards, we can say that you have to look for options wherein it is involving certain kind of communication. So that's where there might be an option talking about schedule a meeting with those 2 stakeholders, making sure that all of them agree onto a certain point or a common ground, making sure that all of us can move together in one single direction. Or in other words, if I would say that, it can be talked about like for any project to be successful, communication is always gonna play a major role for that particular project. So you always have to look for options as in communication plan or communication to be meant at the very first place for solving these kind of issues. Next would be to check the stakeholder register and their engagements with the project. The third one can be to allow focus on different project objectives and different constraints associated with that project. And the final thing that we would talk about would be to highlight the importance of documentation, as in it would come a little later on while identifying the first task, the second task, the third task, and so on, making sure that we apply the correct plans or the correct actions whenever these kind of scenarios pop up in our day-to-day project activities. So the correct answer here would be in relation to something like you would schedule a meeting with those 2 stakeholders, agreeing onto a common point at the end of that particular meeting. So the next type of PMP question that I have is the EVM calculation question, and let's look at the sample now. So here you have been given the value of PV, the value of EV, and the value of AC for you to determine the value of CPI, as in the cost performance index, and then also determine the status of the project, whether it is under budget, over budget, and so on. So now let us see what is the value of CPI first, as in what is the formula that we are going to apply for calculating CPI, and then make the further calculations based on the value that we get for CPI. Okay, so now let us look at the formula that we are going to apply for calculating CPI. CPI's formula is EV by AC, which is earned value divided by the actual cost. So the value that we have been given over here is EV's value is 80,000 and AC's value is 120,000. So if I divide them together, I would be getting the value of 0.67, which makes me understand that if the CPI values are below 1, that means the project is over budget and I need to pay more attention in order for the cost controlling measures that I can take for my project to be on budget, as in how I can make it. So this is something that you have to remember on the values of CPI, SPI. If they are less than 1, it's gonna mean that it is over budget or over schedule. If it is greater than 1, it means they are under budget and under the schedule or on time. So make sure you remember these formulas effectively, that you can quickly make these calculations and come to a conclusion like what is the project status and so on, for finishing up with your questions that you are given for your actual exam. So the third kind of question that you would see as a guaranteed question on your PMP exam would be the risk response question. And now let's see the sample question that could be showing up onto your PMP exam with certain different variations. The question is, the technical risk has been identified with a high priority and high impact. The team suggests adding extra resources to address this issue. So what type of risk response strategy is this? Now let us look at the answer and the approach that we would be using in order for us to come to a conclusion or an answer for this particular question. Now, as a response or as something that you should think about based on the response that you could give for this particular question is, we all know that there are 4 main risk response strategies like avoid, mitigate, transfer, and accept. This particular scenario talks about adding extra resources for resolving that particular situation, which is matching the strategy of mitigation. And that's where we are here talking about kind of reducing the probability or giving more impact by acting or taking proactive actions on it. So the correct answer here would be the mitigation strategy, as it actually helps us to resolve or mitigate this issue. And obviously there is resource involvements involved, like the question did talk about adding extra resources, as that was the team's suggestion. So that's where the correct approach or the correct answer over here would be that it is a mitigation strategy as the answer over here. All right, let us move on to the fourth kind of a question, which is identified as Agile change request question that usually pops up in the PMP examination. So let's see the sample question. During a sprint, the product owner wants to add high priority feature. What should the Scrum Master do? This talks about the roles of product owner and the Scrum Master along with the team. So here we are supposed to address this question from the Scrum Master's perspective, in terms of Scrum Master protecting the team by not allowing the scope to be changed and so on. So let us see what are the corrective ways that we can apply the thinking of servant leadership over here. So as we just discussed, that the Scrum Master helps in terms of protecting the team from scope changes. As the scope changes are protected, it helps us in maintaining the sprint goal. Also, it helps us to respect the team commitment for solving certain kind of questions, and then we can definitely add that feature to the product backlog, prioritizing it for the next sprint, as that would be the best scenario that we can consider as far as the project deliverables are concerned. So this is the strategy that the Scrum Master should adopt in terms of us answering this question. Like, the Scrum Master should wait until the next sprint planning meeting, making sure that this particular high value or high priority feature is added to the next sprint. Okay, moving on to the next and the final type of the question over here, which is the communication channel identification, as in you have to count the number of communication channels that you would be requiring based on the number of stakeholders. So let us see the sample question for this kind of a question. It says your project has 8 stakeholders. How many potential communication channels exist? Now, we had already seen the formula before in my previous video. I'm linking that in the description box. Do check it out. But the formula to solve these kind of question is communication channels can be identified using the formula like N times n minus 1 divided by 2, where n is the number of stakeholders. So here we have 8 stakeholders. That's where we can say replace the value of n by 8, and that's how we end up getting 28 channels altogether. Before I end this video, I wanted to talk about final tips and tricks that you can use for solving each kind of questions that you see onto your PMP exam. Starting with the very first tip is to read the questions carefully. Second is definitely try to look for different keywords onto your exams or onto the exam questions that you have been presented with. The third tip is to apply your PMBOK principles. Fourth is to make sure that you apply your servant leadership mindset. Please refer to the mindset slides that I'm attaching in the description below, just to make sure that you have an enough understanding of Agile and the traditional mindset that you would need to apply on for different questions during your PMP exam. And the final tip is to remember your project constraints, as there will be different questions for sure asking you to apply those constraints as and when the situation arises. There will be different duties of a project manager. So make sure you remember those project constraints for your PMP exam. If you enjoyed watching this video, please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe, as it is gonna help me to reach out more professionals who are onto their PMP preparation journey. And also let me know in the comment section, how was your exam and what was your score based on your PMP preparation. See you in the next video.